The storm broke open like a curse over the desert, smashing sky to earth in a war of mud and thunder. By the time the rain reached the town of Sundown Ridge, it was too late to pray. Roofs rattled, livestock screamed in the dark. The river, dry for months, came back as a black tongue rushing over stone and sagebrush, carving through the valley like it remembered something bitter. Folks ran from their homes half-dressed, dragging children, clutching heirlooms and rifles, slipping in the rising sludge. And from the North Ridge, silhouetted against the ash-colored sky, came the rider. They called him Coyote. Some said he was half-Apache, half-drifter, with scars on his back and a bullet still buried in his thigh. Others claimed he'd been raised by wolves up near Skeleton Canyon, taught to hunt by silence and steal by shadow. Most just knew he didn't belong anywhere. He wore a hat with a crow feather stitched in, carried an old carbine across his back, and spoke little. He drank alone, laughed at nothing, and had killed 2 men last spring during a card game that turned to blood. Sundown Ridge didn't trust him. But that night they needed a horseman with guts and grit, someone who didn't care about dying. That made him theirs. The flood had swallowed the south fields and now tore through the center of town like a beast off chain. Screams carried over the current. The preacher, Brother Ellison, stood barefoot in the street, drenched to the bone, pointing to the collapsing chapel. "She's in there," he shouted. "My daughter, Ruth." Coyote didn't speak, just stared down the chapel. Water slapped against the foundation. The steeple was canted like a drunk. Behind its shuttered windows, a light flickered once, then died. The rider kicked his horse forward. Inside the chapel, the pews floated like coffins. The altar had splintered. A Bible bobbed against the pulpit. Ruth Ellison, 17, hair unbound and eyes wide, clung to the rafters above the nave, her cotton dress soaked and tangled. She did not cry out. She'd been raised to fear the sound of her own voice. Coyote burst through the doors on foot. The horse wouldn't come in. It had more sense than its rider. Water climbed to his waist as he waded forward, pushing aside hymnals and half-submerged chairs. Lightning split the windows behind her. Their eyes met. He didn't shout, just gestured, sharp and certain, as if command meant more than kindness. She hesitated, then dropped. He caught her mid-fall, knees buckling, breath knocked from him. The roof groaned. They fought the current together. She wrapped her arms around his neck without permission, and he carried her out as the chapel collapsed behind them. When they emerged, the town watched the half-breed walk from the river with the preacher's daughter clinging to him like sin itself, watched as the preacher dropped to his knees in the mud and wept, watched as Ruth looked back once at the ruins and did not let go. By morning, the flood had drawn back. The sun came like an apology. That same day, the town met. On the porch of the general store, with the river still bleeding through the gutters, the sheriff spoke what others whispered. "She's unmarried, he saved her, and now she's spoiled in the eyes of the Lord. You want him to stay?" Then they wed. The preacher said nothing. Neither did Coyote. But Ruth, she smiled. It was the first time she'd ever smiled in public, and it wasn't a sweet smile, not gentle or grateful. It was the kind of smile a knife might make if it had lips. The kind that said, "You can bind me to a man, but you don't know what I'll do with him once you do." She took his hand. Coyote looked down at her, rain still dripping from his collar, eyes unreadable. Then he nodded once, like a man stepping into a fire. And that was how it began. Not with love, but with flood and fire, with a town's judgment, with a girl too quiet for too long and a man too wild to break. The wedding was held under gray skies. No music, no family, just a Bible turned to pages too wet to read and a ring hammered out of a horseshoe. Ruth wore her mother's dress, threadbare and long in the hem. Coyote wore the same hat, the crow feather now drooping. They said vows they didn't believe. They kissed without warmth. The preacher refused to look at them. And by dusk they were man and wife. The cabin given to them stood on the far edge of town, up near Widow's Bluff, where the wind never stopped howling and the ground was hard as bone. It had belonged to a trapper who vanished years ago. No one had wanted it since. But it suited them. And so they began. A half-Apache with blood on his boots and no last name. And a preacher's daughter with a fire in her gut and something cold behind her eyes. The town had made them husband and wife. What the town didn't know was what they had truly created. A match. And kindling. The cabin was cold the first week. Coyote made no move to warm it. He rose before light, chopped wood with clean, brutal swings, stacked it outside and never brought it in. Ruth learned fast how to light a fire from damp tinder, how to wash blood from a shirt without asking who it belonged to, how to keep her silence sharp as the blade under the floorboards. He didn't touch her, not at night, not in the way the town whispered he must. He slept on a straw mat beside the hearth. She took the cot. Their voices met only when needed. Ruth watched him mostly, watched the way he always kept one ear turned toward the door, how he checked the same knot in the floor every morning, reached inside, felt for the knife. She didn't ask about the other things buried there. She already knew some truths stayed underground for a reason. But silence wasn't the same as peace. One night near the end of the second week, he came in soaked with someone else's blood. It soaked his sleeve, thick and rust-colored, and dripped from the hem of his coat. Ruth didn't flinch. She laid the basin out and filled it from the kettle. He sat wordless as she peeled the coat off, unbuttoned his shirt, and cleaned the gash along his ribs. "Was it the sheriff?" she asked, voice low and even. Coyote's eyes flicked to hers. No surprise in them, no answer either. "Good," she said. He didn't thank her, didn't need to. The town watched them from afar, watched Ruth carry water now, her posture straighter, watched how Coyote spent afternoons fixing fences for no man in particular, how he lingered near the church but never stepped inside. The preacher began preaching fire again, about the perils of yoking oneself to the heathen, about daughters who needed correction. Ruth listened through the cracks in the chapel wall. Then she stopped going. There was a boy named Eli, the blacksmith's son, who had courted Ruth before the flood. He still left daisy stems on their fence. Coyote burned them without comment. One day Eli didn't show for his chores. His father found him behind the livery, face broken in two places, both arms bloodied. He said it was a horse that kicked him. But his eyes kept drifting toward Widow's Bluff. The preacher came to the cabin once, alone. Ruth opened the door. Her father stood there, hat clutched to his chest like a shield. "You're not living right, girl," he said. "The Lord's gonna take what he gave back." Ruth stepped aside. "Tell him yourself." Coyote was at the hearth, sharpening a skinning knife. The sound echoed off the cabin walls, slow and rhythmic. He didn't look up. The preacher didn't cross the threshold. He left with his lips tight and his hands shaking. After that, no one came. But news still reached them. Bandits near Hollow Creek, 3 men dead, a trading post burned, the sheriff organizing a posse. Coyote watched the dust trails from the bluff as the town armed itself. "They'll want you with them," Ruth said, watching him pack his saddlebag. "I'm not going for them," he answered. "Then for who?" He paused. "There's a man in that group. One of them burned a farm out east. Girl inside didn't make it." Her stomach turned, not from the words, but from how quiet they came. "You knew her?" she asked. Coyote strapped the carbine across his back. "No." And then he was gone, riding into the dusk like a man heading toward a thing he already regretted. He was gone 3 nights. When he came back, he didn't speak. Just sat in the doorway, boots caked in dry blood, eyes darker than before. Ruth brought him a tin cup of water. He drank it slow. "What happened?" "I left 3 breathing," he said. "The rest ain't talking." "You didn't have to come back." "I did." And then for the first time, he touched her. Not with hunger, not with pity. He reached out and laid a hand on her shoulder, calloused fingers warm through the cotton of her sleeve. Ruth stood still as stone. She let it linger. After that, something shifted. He began to teach her. How to shoot first, not with sentiment, just correction. Her stance was wrong, her wrists were weak, but her aim was true. Within a week, she could drop a tin can from 50 yards. Then how to track, then how to lie, then how to leave a room without a sound. "You planning to run?" he asked once. "No," she said, "but I like knowing I can." One morning she found a folded map under her plate. Circled in red was a cabin far east, near the edge of old silver mines. "What's this?" she asked. "Safe house," he said, "if something comes." "You think something will?" He didn't answer. That meant yes. 2 weeks passed. Then the preacher's barn burned down. He came again, this time dragging behind him a deputy. They stood on the porch. The preacher's face was tight with rage, the deputy with nerves. "She did this," Ellison said. "That witch daughter of mine, he taught her how. She's not Ruth anymore." Coyote stepped out, rifle held loose in his arms. "I taught her how to survive," he said, "which you didn't." The deputy's hand twitched near his holster. "You sure you want to draw?" Coyote asked. The deputy didn't. They left without more words. But that night Ruth didn't sleep. She sat by the window, the rifle on her lap, eyes locked on the dark hill below. Coyote didn't stop her. They didn't speak of what would come. But both knew storms don't pass without returning. This time, when it did, it wouldn't be water. It would be fire. The night the preacher died, there were no witnesses, only smoke. By morning, his body was found in the ruins of the chapel. Face down, half-burned, eyes wide open. The bell tower had collapsed inward. The Bible, saved from flood once, now ash. Sheriff claimed lightning. Others blamed the old roof, termites, God's wrath, but no one asked Ruth where she'd been. They wouldn't have liked her answer. Coyote stood at the edge of the wreckage, smoke curling around his boots. He didn't look at the body. He looked at the tracks, boot heels deep in the mud, leading out, not in, not fire's work, not God's. A choice. Ruth stood beside him, hair bound this time, hands tucked in her shawl. Calm. "Do you want me to ask?" he said. She shook her head. "He died long before last night." The sheriff didn't press her. No arrest, no trial, just a fast burial in scorched ground and a warning stare. No sermon since. A silence settled on Sundown Ridge, thick and dry as cottonmouth skin. One church burned, another not raised. Folks watched their steps. The general store kept its doors locked before sundown. Coyote was seen more often now, riding the rim of town, watching the horizon like it owed him a debt. They weren't husband and wife in the way folks imagined. They moved like shadows orbiting each other, never colliding, always watching. But the bond was there. Not of love. Love was a word for poems and lies. It was something heavier. Respect, shared blood on their boots. Ruth had taken to sleeping with her boots on. Coyote taught her how to open a throat in the dark, how to disarm a man before he drew, how to clean a gun blindfolded. "What if I forget?" she asked once. "You won't. But what if I do?" He looked at her long. Then you die. She never forgot again. News came on wind and hoof. Men riding down from Red Veil Gulch, mean ones with rope in hand and reward posters in their saddle bags. A new governor up north offering money for old bounties. Coyote's name inked among them, spelled wrong, but his scars drew right. He didn't leave. Instead, he and Ruth spent 3 nights burying iron traps in the trails around the cabin. No words, just sweat and metal, set teeth and checked angles. Coyote drew lines in ash across the doorway. "You believe in that?" she asked. He shrugged. "Doesn't matter, they do." And sure enough, 2 nights later, a man came. Slipped past the bluff, over the dry creek, knife drawn. Ruth heard him first. She didn't scream. She lit the lantern and stepped outside, shotgun tucked beneath her coat. Coyote wasn't home. The man grinned at her. "You're prettier than they said." She didn't answer. He stepped forward. "They got a price on your husband, dead or not. You tell me which way you want it." She fired. Buckshot took his thigh, shattered it. He screamed. She walked over, knelt beside him, calm. "You didn't ask what the price on me is." The man blinked, pain bubbling. "Ain't one." "There will be." She opened his coat, took the poster, her husband's name misspelled again. She folded it, tucked it into her dress. Then she dragged the man to the trap line. Coyote found her an hour later, blood on her sleeves, eyes wide but dry. He said nothing, just buried the man deep without a marker. Next day Ruth cut her hair, short, practical, she bound it with wire. Sundown Ridge noticed. Women muttered, men watched. She stopped wearing dresses. They tried once more to send someone, Judge Weller from the county seat. Came with paper, warrant, silver star polished bright as a mirror. Ruth met him in the sheriff's office, Coyote leaning against the wall behind her. The judge read the charges: arson, harboring a fugitive, assault. Ruth listened. When he finished, she said, "Do you intend to arrest me?" He blinked. "Well." She pulled the bounty poster from her coat, dropped it on the table. The judge picked it up, frowned. That's not official." "Neither is your warrant," Coyote said. The judge blustered. "I'll send men." "You sent one already," Ruth said. "He's gone now." The judge left before dusk, never came back. That winter, no one came up the bluff. Ruth grew harder, Coyote quieter. Their world narrowed to what they could see, what they could control. They built traps in snow, laid lines of salt across windowsills, read by firelight when there was peace, and practiced blades when there was. She asked once, "Why me?" He looked up from his rifle. "Why did you come for me that night? You could have let the river take me." He set the rifle down. "I saw the way your father prayed, like he was afraid of your silence." "That's not a reason." "I didn't need one." She nodded, took that answer like a gift. Outside, coyotes howled. Ruth smiled. "I think they're calling you. They're calling you too now." She stepped closer to the window, pulled her shawl tight. "I don't mind," she said. "They speak clearer than most." Coyote leaned back, hat low over his eyes. "There'll be more men come," he said, "more than we can bury." "I know. You afraid?" Ruth thought about it, thought of fire and flood, of the town that tried to own her, of the man who thought his blood could claim her soul. "No," she said, "not anymore." The snow fell harder. But it would melt. And when it did, the land would change again. Like always, spring came late to Sundown Ridge. The snow lingered longer than it should have, clinging to the roots and shaded gullies like a dying hand. When it finally broke, it did so with a violence not unlike the flood, a slow, cracking thaw that revealed what winter had buried. Bones, for one. Two riders found them down in Dogjo Hollow, just east of the ridge. Shallow graves split by frost, Coyote's work. The town didn't ask, not out loud, but whispers moved faster than truth. They said Ruth was the one now, sharpening the knives, drawing the lines, that she'd taken the man and hollowed him out like a gourd, filled the rest with her will. They were wrong. Coyote still moved like someone who knew how death worked, but Ruth moved like someone who no longer feared earning it. That made all the difference. It was around then that a man rode in from New Mexico. Didn't give a name, big coat, big voice, carried a rifle with a custom scope and a badge from some other county, old and worn. He wasn't hunting Coyote exactly, he was hunting legend. He'd heard the stories. A preacher's daughter with a wolf's heart, a half-breed killer keeping the town quiet by the threat of his name. He wanted proof. He went to the saloon first, looking for talk. Then the jailhouse, where the sheriff told him to keep riding. Finally, he went to the bluff. Ruth was alone. Coyote had gone 2 days west for salt and ammunition. The stranger didn't knock, just stepped through the open gate and shouted her name. Ruth Ellison. She stood on the porch, skin sundark, sleeves rolled, a length of rope in her hands. He nodded, polite-like. I heard stories, thought I'd see what kind of fire burns up here. You brought water, she asked, voice dry. He laughed, you're what they say you are. She looked him over. No, I'm worse. He smiled, reached for the rifle at his back. She didn't give him time. The rope in her hands whistled once through the air, weighted at the end, looped around his wrist before he cleared leather. She jerked it hard, fast, and he went down with a grunt, hand twisted behind his back. She stepped off the porch, pressed her boot to his spine. Still think it's just a story. He grunted, where's your man? Out getting salt. That why you're so sure? She leaned close. No, I'm sure because you're stupid. She let him go. He crawled backward, face red, but he didn't draw again. He stood, dusted himself off, and left without another word. Coyote returned that night with a mule and 2 tins of powder. He saw the scuff marks on the dirt, the rifle marks in the porch rail. Who, he asked. Doesn't matter. Alive. For now. Coyote nodded. Good. They sat on the porch until the sun fell. Coyote passed her a flask. She didn't drink from it, but she held it a long time. That night they slept in the same bed. Nothing happened, no touch, no words, just the weight of one body next to another. The kind of silence only earned through violence. When morning came, she didn't move away. They weren't husband and wife, they weren't lovers, they were something older, older than promises, older than blood. Survivors bound by fire. 2 weeks later, the law came. Not one man, 12. Deputies deputized by desperation. Men who'd lost sons, brothers, pride, not all from this town. Some from farther off, Yuma, Prescott, south past the dry lands. They came with warrants, came with ropes. They came for Coyote. The sheriff didn't stop them. He came up the bluff first, alone, hat in hand. They've made up their minds, he said. There's no stopping it. Coyote didn't answer. Ruth stood behind him, shotgun in hand, eyes unblinking. You stay, the sheriff said, voice shaking. It's war. Coyote looked at Ruth, then past her toward the cabin, the traps, the earth they'd shaped with their sweat, the fire pit, the shelf of clean guns, the rope she'd coiled just right. "You'd burn the whole town for him?" the sheriff asked. "No," Ruth said, "just the ones coming up the hill." They left that night. Not to run. To set the field. They planted black powder beneath the trail, nailed iron to the base of pines. They strung wire where a horse would never see it, sharpened stakes, and coated them in rust and mud. And then they waited. The 12 came at dawn, riding hard. Coyote met them first, alone, halfway down the hill, arms raised. "Don't make her do it," he said. They didn't answer. A shot rang. It missed. But Coyote dropped anyway, dragging himself to the brush. They chased. That was their mistake. The first trap took 2 horses. The wire took 1 man's leg. Then the fire flared, Ruth, from the ridge with a torch in hand, lighting the path behind them. Coyote rose from the brush, bleeding but standing. Gunfire lit the pines. 6 went down in the first 2 minutes. 3 turned back. 1 screamed. And then silence. When the smoke cleared, only 2 men still breathed. One dropped his gun. The other cried for his brother. Ruth walked between them. "You came for a bounty," she said. "Now go back and tell them the cost." They ran. Coyote sat beside a stump, breath shallow, hand over his ribs. "You're hit," she said. "I've been worse. I'll fix it." He nodded. She knelt beside him. "You stayed," he said. "So did you." He leaned his head back, eyes to the sky. "Still think they'll stop coming?" "No." He smiled, teeth red. "Good." The wind shifted. Somewhere down below, the sheriff was already telling a new version of the story. One with fewer details. One that left out the parts that made the ground shake. But up on the bluff, the truth stood plain. They weren't victims, not anymore. They were the fire. And the town had built them. Summer came dry and cracked, curling the leaves and baking the bluffs until the dirt split like old leather. No rain, no lawmen, no peace either, just the weight of what they'd done, thick in the air. They buried the dead in silence. No words, no stones. Coyote dug 6 graves before the wound reopened and bled through his shirt. Ruth stitched him with thread boiled clean in fire. He didn't wince. When it was done, she burned the map he'd given her that first winter. The safe house, the place to run. They weren't running anymore. Word spread faster than buzzards. The preacher's daughter had become something else now. Not a wife. Not a woman, not in the way the town wanted her to be. A reckoning, a lesson, something to fear. Coyote's name changed, too. No longer a man. Now a story told at dusk by men too old to lie and too proud to admit the truth. That one Half-Apache with dead eyes and a ghost for a bride had taken their justice and buried it in their own dirt. They weren't bothered again. Not by judges, nor by bounty men, nor by whispers. Instead, Sundown Ridge began to rot from the inside. The saloon closed first. The owner's son never came back from the bluff. Then the smithy. Then the church bell tower, never rebuilt, crumbled in a windstorm, killing 2. The preacher's grave was found disturbed, the coffin broken from within. Folks said the ground had rejected him. Said the girl he beat with sermons had cursed it. No one said Ruth's name above a whisper after that. They let the bluff be. Up there, she and Coyote lived quiet. Mornings were work, chopping wood, feeding the mule, hauling water. Afternoons were training, rifle practice, knife drills, trap checking. Coyote grew slower, favoring one side, but his eyes stayed sharp. Ruth learned to make poultices from yarrow and pine resin. She learned to clean fish with her eyes closed. She kept a journal now with no names in it, just facts, roots, tricks, a ledger of survival. They spoke little, but the silence between them had changed. It had weight now, warmth. At night they sat beneath the stars. She'd lean her head against his shoulder. He'd rest his hand over hers. "You ever think about what it might have been?" she asked once. Coyote spat into the dirt. "Don't believe in might have." She smiled. "I think about it," she said. "What if we'd met different, if I wasn't born under a pulpit and you weren't carrying ghosts in your shadow?" He said nothing for a long time, then wouldn't have lasted. "No. You needed fire, I needed something to burn." She nodded. "We still do." That night she touched him first. Not out of hunger, out of recognition. He didn't pull away. When morning came, nothing had changed except everything. They never said they loved each other. It wasn't that kind of world. But when he started coughing blood, Ruth didn't flinch. She boiled every herb she knew, packed his chest with steam and salve. He tried to stand. She knocked him back down. "You think I came this far to bury you?" she snapped. Coyote smiled, lips red. "Someone gotta." "No," she said, "not yet." He lasted 3 more weeks. On the last night, he asked her to bring him the knife from under the floorboards. She did. He held it, turned it in his palm, then handed it to her. "You take it now." "I already did," she said. Coyote died with his boots off, under the stars, hand still resting over hers. She buried him deep, not where the others lay. Up above the bluff, where the sky broke wide and wind never stopped moving. No marker. Just a feather. The crow feather from his old hat. Then Ruth came down the hill. She walked into town at noon. No shawl, no rifle, just the knife he'd given her, worn low on her belt. The people of Sundown Ridge saw her coming. They stepped aside. She stopped in front of the old chapel ruins. It had been gutted, boarded up. Grass grew through the floor. She lit a match and set it burning again. Nothing left to save. Then she went to the sheriff's office. He was older now, gray in the beard, hands trembling when he opened the door. "I came to tell you," she said. "He's gone." The sheriff nodded. "We figured." "I'm staying." He looked at her. "Here. You owe me that." He didn't argue. Ruth took the bluff, took the land around it, took the title to the trapper's cabin, and scratched out every other name in the ledger. No one contested it. She rebuilt the porch, reinforced the chimney, painted the inside in ash and ochre, wore her hair short, her eyes hard, her boots always laced. Children were warned not to go up there. But sometimes they did. And if they were quiet and respectful, she'd teach them things their fathers wouldn't. How to read tracks in dry ground, how to set a snare with no rope, how to lie without blinking. She never remarried. Never needed to. They said she talked to the wind now, called coyotes by name. That she kept the knife sharp in her hand. That sometimes, at dusk, you could see her standing at the edge of the bluff, watching the town below like it was something she was still deciding whether to forgive. She never did. And the town never asked again. Not after the flood. Not after the fire. Not after what they made her become. Because in Sundown Ridge, legends were never carved from kindness. They were made from blood. And Ruth Ellison's story was the last one anyone dared to write.